I thought it would be good just to shift gears and kind of get back to our tribe speaker series. I know we've had a lot of amazing people on, and we feel very fortunate to be able to share, to share our people with you, who are now your people. Dr. Mark McLaughlin was actually one of my classmates, and also was in school with Marsha, and was a phenomenal wrestler. He's not only in the William and Mary Hall of Fame, but also the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. He is an actual brain surgeon, where there is little to no margin for error there. So incredibly impressive person, incredibly amazing athlete. He also has his hand in coaching. He started a wrestling program in Trenton, and has given back to his sport in so many ways. And his bio goes on for days, and lots of great little snippet articles that you can find on him. And he's written a book called Cognitive Dominance. And so he's going to share some thoughts with you guys. And then I thought we could do our normal routine of asking questions in the chat group kind of after he's done, if that works for you, Mark.
Absolutely. Yes.
Take it away, my friend.
Great. In preparing for this talk, I wanted to lay out from the very beginning. We're going to talk about writing books. We're going to talk about doing brain surgery, and we're going to talk about getting Rhodes scholarships. So just plant those seeds in your mind. And I tried to kind of imagine what you all were going through. I know that 48 hours ago, you just found out that your season was canceled. I was trying to imagine what the seniors were feeling like, just having that precious year, taken away from you. And I just couldn't even imagine how frustrating, how angering, how alone you feel with something like that. And I kept thinking, like, if I were sitting in your seat and I was a senior at William and Mary, and I could go back in time and I could tell you as a 55-year-old person, how could I help that 20-year-old me or that 20 or 18-year-old you? What would I say to you? What would I say to the younger me? And it really comes down to, I would want to emphasize something called transformational moments. And I want to share 3 experiences with you and with the younger me. So first, transformational moments. I was a philosophy major. I loved the Wren building, and I was really interested in, philosophy and also psychology at William and Mary. And I remember way back when looking at studies by Carl Jung, a Swiss psychologist, who I'm sure you've heard if you're taken any basic psych classes. And Jung was really interested in, our pathways in life and what happens in our pathways in life, what goes wrong with them, what goes right with them. And he had this little paradigm where, we're all in this place of where we are, and we're on our way to where we think we should be. And we're all acting in a way to get to where we think we should be. And along the way, these events drop into our lives, one after another after another. And each of these events are what he called transformational moments. They're moments of something unexpected that happens that can either propel you forward and closer to your goal, or they can get in the way of your goal. And you have to figure out whether you need to navigate around them or you need to use them to get to your goal. So there are these transformational elements. And Jung studied this deeply. In fact, he was a big believer in alchemy. And, we think of alchemy as the old crazy people who, wanted to turn lead into gold. But really, alchemy was the precursor to chemistry and to science. It's been around for 8,000 years. And Jung believed that these events could be the alchemy of your life, like not just physically, but metaphysically. He didn't believe that you could just turn lead into gold. He thought you could take chaos and make it into order. He felt you could take something that's senseless and make sense out of it. And it's the alchemy of the mind and the metaphysical concept that I think is a really, really important concept that Jung talked about. And that's that's why I love coaching kids. And I'm sure that's why, Marcia, you and Julie love coaching, is because there's a transformation of somebody when they come in to when they become a seasoned athlete and they're a competitor. And it's this incredible feeling that you have when you're transformed. So transformational moments are things that happen in our life. They can be creative or they can be destructive. Like a photon of energy can come down and it can hit a leaf, and it can create the Krebs cycle and get energy with chlorophyll, or it can also destroy a snowflake, right? So events can be even more incredibly creative, like the invention of the Gutenberg press, right? Or they can be incredibly destructive,
for everybody, right?
9/11 or the COVID virus. I'm loving the virtual background. They can cause terrible destruction. But in that, you can find some type of transformation, and it can make or break you. So with storing that transformational experience, I want to share with you 3 stories. The first one is the story of the gripper. And the gripper is this, on the cover of my book, there's a picture of this wooden gripper. And this was my father's exercise piece of equipment that he kept in his car. And every time I ever hear this sound, this clicking, it takes me back to 6th grade when I started wrestling, and I would finish wrestling practice and I'd be exhausted, and I'd climb into his car, and he'd move the gripper away from the seat and push it under his console, and he'd hold my hand, and we'd drive home from wrestling practice. But any red light we stopped at, he'd pull the gripper out and he'd squeeze it. If we ever had to stop somewhere and pick somebody up, he'd be squeezing his gripper. And it was his talisman to fight idleness. He used it all the time, and he was an exercise fanatic. He picked up weightlifting in 1946 when people thought it was ridiculous or even dangerous to lift weights. But he found that it gave him energy, and it actually helped him get through night law school so that he could become an attorney. And he said when people were falling asleep in class or they couldn't study because they were falling asleep, he found that weightlifting and exercise was something that pulled him through. And that experience that he passed on to me was just such an incredible, invaluable lesson. I mean, and there were so many pieces, so many things that this little $5 trinket taught me, and I hope it can teach you too. And the lessons were really that, like, physical exercise can be done anywhere. You don't need a gym to be exercising. That physical exercise not only builds strength, but it also builds cognitive energy. And probably most important to me, when this subliminal message he gave me was, never waste a second of your life. Never waste a second of your life. And nowadays, we don't have a lot of these things in cars. We have phones in cars. And when we stop at a red light, or we're stopped at the airport to pick somebody up, or we're waiting for something, we're waiting for a meeting to happen, what do? We pull up our phone. It's incredible to believe, but the average American spends at least 3 hours a day on their mobile phone and another 3 hours on television. I have to confess, sometimes I spend more than 3 hours on my mobile phone. And you can do some learning from your mobile phone. There's no question you can get information out of it, and you can watch news and you can read. But there's also a lot of passive downtime that's useless time, that's sucking time away from things you could be doing better. If you're looking at Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or any of those apps, realize when you're looking at them that they're designed by a corporation who wants you to stay on that channel, and they're doing everything they can to keep you on that channel. And you need to understand that that's not something that's going to be useful. It's important to know, there's a great quote, it's not that life is short, it's that we waste a lot of it. And so if I could tell my younger self anything, it would be, man, if you ever have any extra time, if you ever find yourself wasting time, pick up a book, pick up some literature, read something, keep making yourself smarter. If it's got to be on the phone, choose Audible. If it's got to be on the phone, choose an informative podcast, but make it useful. Don't make it wasteful. That would be the first thing I would say. And if there was one thing I wish I had done earlier in my life, and that would be to habituate my reading, to make it regular every day. I do it now, first thing in the morning. I spend my first hour reading and just picking out things that I want to look at in terms of literature and poetry. And that, if I wish I had done that earlier, I'd be a lot farther along than I am now. So the gripper, never waste a second of your life, would be the first thing I'd want to say. Second thing I wanted to talk about was an experience I had later on in my career. It was a couple years ago. And I was in my car getting ready to go in and do a craniotomy. And it was a difficult craniotomy. It was a patient that had a brain tumor in their visual pathways, in their occipital lobe, and it abutted the transverse sinus, which is a big vein right behind the ear, which carries about 1/5 of the cardiac output. And I knew that I had a very significant obstacle to encounter with this operation, and I was preparing myself for it. And I was getting ready to go into the operating room. I was in the car, I was getting ready to go in the hospital, and I was trying to put on my neurosurgery mask. That's the mask where I'm unflappable and can't be flustered, and I'm ready to go and extremely confident. And I'm about to go in to see the patient and his family who are waiting for me. But the surgery's been delayed. It was supposed to be at 11 o'clock, and it's been delayed, and now it's 2:30. And 2:30 is a time in the OR that it's not a great time to start an operation. Typically wise, because there's a shift change at 3 o'clock. So whoever sets the OR table for you is going to be leaving, and the new person that comes in is going to be a smart, talented, certified person, but they're not going to know the table like the person that was there before. And furthermore, it's not my regular person to operate with. And surgery is a lot like dancing. When you're in the OR, I'll put my hand up and my scrub nurse will hand me the instrument that I know I need sometimes when I'm not even saying anything. So when you're doing an operation in the late afternoon, it's surgical rhythm can get destroyed, and that's troublesome. On top of that, it's a tumor that I haven't operated on in a while. It's something I've done many times before, but not recently, because our practice had brought on a tumor expert, and I had been giving the patients with tumors over to him. But he was out of town this week. So I'm doing something that I hadn't done in a while, and I'm just trying to get my steps together and exactly how I'm going to do it. And I'm thinking about it. And I also realize it's Friday. I'm tired. I've already done 5 operations this week. I've seen dozens of patients. It's 80-hour work week. And it's a tumor that just can't wait. It's a dangerous tumor that's got swelling and could bleed, and it's got to get done. I'm getting ready to go in the hospital, and I get a pop-up on my phone that says, you got a voicemail. It's weird. My phone didn't ring, so it's just voicemail. So I look at it, and it's my father's doctor. And my father had not been feeling well that week, and I knew he had gone to the doctor. So I was worried about him. So then I go through this mental wrestling match of, well, do I answer this now before the surgery, or do I wait till after the surgery? It's Friday. It's probably going to be a 4 or 5 hour operation. If I don't call him now, maybe I won't get to him until the Monday. So I decide to call him. And he gives me the news that my father's got acute myelogenous leukemia, which is in an 88-year-old man, pretty much a death sentence. So now I'm like nauseated. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to do this case? I got a hard case. I'm tired. It's not something I regularly do. It's late in the afternoon. And now I got this. You just totally taken your mind out of the game, Mark. Like, what are you going to do? So I'm struggling with what to do. And I realize I got to go in and I got to talk to this patient. And maybe I'm going to cancel a surgery. maybe I should pay attention to the omens and cancel it and do it Saturday. But I think a little more about that. And Saturday is another day that I'm on call. It's not going to be any easier. In fact, there'll be less people in the hospital. I'm not going to get the same person in my scrub room. And it's a tumor that's already, it's swollen and it could bleed overnight, and this person could get into trouble. And when I say trouble in neurosurgery, that means die. That means they could die that night if I don't operate on it. So I say, all right, well, look, I'm going to go in and I'm going to go meet this guy and his family, and I'm going to shake his hand. I'm going to see how I feel. And if I still don't feel like doing this, I'm going to cancel the surgery. So I go in and I'm walking the halls, and I go get a cup of coffee, and I go into the locker room, and I put on my uniform, which is my scrubs. And because I'm a performer just like you, I still go to a locker room, put on a uniform, and step into a hallowed ground and have to perform. So I'm getting myself here. My emotions and my mojo starts coming to me, and I go see this man, and his family's at his side, and they're waiting for me. They're depending on me. And so I'm thinking to myself, I gotta do this. I gotta do this. I don't feel like doing this, but I gotta do this, and he needs me. And what comes to me are some verses of a poem that my father gave me a couple of years earlier. And those are the words of Rudyard Kipling. And I want to share a couple of verses with you. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they're gone, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. It's beautiful. I don't know if you know this, but those words, triumph and disaster, treat those two imposters just the same, they sit over the transom of the entrance to the center court of Wimbledon. Some of the most inspiring words you could ever see. And it's funny because when I spoke up at West Point last, I told the cadets that if you want to look for performance enhancement literature, poetry is the world's first performance enhancement literature. And it's really rich with those words. So as these words came to me and I started really thinking about it, I thought, you know what? This is really hard. This is really hard, but I'm not going to let this distract me. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to let this event and this surgery, I'm going to dedicate it to my father. I'm going to dedicate it to everything he's taught me and everything that he would expect me to do, which is my job, to take care of these people when they need me. And I'll go see him after the surgery. So I went ahead and I did that man's surgery, got the whole tumor out, got him in the recovery room safely. He recovered very nicely. And I turned something that I felt like it was going to be a terrible, terrible experience into one of my finest hours. So my third story I'll tell you goes back a little ways. It's to a little boy that I met. His name was Anthony. I met him in the emergency room in Springfield, Massachusetts, summer of 2000. He had fallen off a school bus and he had a cut over his eye. But his parents were at his bedside and they told me, there's something wrong with our son, Dr. McLaughlin. He's acting drunk. We have a pizza parlor down the street and he busts his tables for me. He's my number one helper and he's been dropping things and he's been sleeping all the time. Quick MRI scan showed that he had a tumor pressing on his brainstem. I had all the skills. I had trained at the University of Pittsburgh. I had a pediatric experience that was world class. And I had everything I could, every training skill I had to cure him. And I was attached to him. He had a great sense of humor. He was this cute kid with a great smile, and he was confident and I was confident, and I took him to the operating room the next day. I put him in the prone position with his head down. I held his skull together with pins and locked his head into position. I made an incision over the back of his head, and I carried it down to the occipital bone. I turned the occipital bone craniotomy and opened the covering of his brain, and I came down on a really angry, bluish vascular tumor. I began surrounding it, and I began taking its blood supply and encircling it and putting patties around it so I could surround the enemy. And then I began going in the center of it and gutting it and scooping it out like a little micro melon ball, or taking melon balls out of a melon. And it collapsed on itself, and I collapsed it and I collapsed it. And I finally, after about 3 hours, I got down to his brainstem, and I shaved the edges of the tumor off of his brainstem. And I finished the operation. I couldn't see any more tumor along his brainstem, and I took him back to the recovery room, and he woke up perfectly. And I thought, wow, this is awesome, man. I trained my whole life for this, and this is what I got into, and I love it. I'm thrilled. And Anthony did great for about 24 hours. Then he stopped talking, and he started shrieking at the top of his lungs. I came back in to see him. I took him for a scan. The scan looked clean. There was no blood clot. There was no problem with the surgical area. But he wouldn't talk to me, and he wouldn't move his arms and his legs. He had developed something called cerebellar mutism, which is a rare complication from pediatric tumors. And I had to tell his mom and dad that this was something that would get better over time, but it was going to be a rough haul for a couple weeks. They understood, and we put him back in the ICU, and a couple of days later, he didn't get better. He got worse. He started developing a fluid buildup on his brain. So I had to take him back to the operating room, and I had to put a shunt tubing in to bypass the fluid so that it would go away from his brain and go into his belly. A couple of days later, his pathology came back. Anaplastic tumor. Not a good prognosis. A couple of days later, his shunt clogged, and then it got infected. Had to take him back to the operating room. Had to take out his shunt. Had to put another drain in. Clean out his infection. And with every single one of these complications, Anthony's neurological examination got worse and worse and worse. And I just saw this beautiful boy slipping through my fingers day by day. I knew he'd probably never be the same, even if he made a recovery from the point where he was at. And he suffered, and his parents suffered. And he finally stabilized. He was able to go to rehab and get ready to go for his radiation oncology and his chemotherapy. 3 months in the hospital waiting for that time. And on the day he was going to leave, his mom and dad, they were such wonderful people. They were like, Dr. McLaughlin, we want to get a picture of you and Anthony. Will you take a picture with him? And I stood by his bedside, a young surgeon, and I held his hand, and they took this picture of me. But truth be told, I faked that smile. I faked it because there was nothing good coming to this kid. Nothing. He went from being a normal child to being neurologically devastated. And he left the hospital, but he never left me. And that was when I began taking long walks at night, wondering, asking myself, what could I have done differently? Did I retract too hard on his cerebellum? Did I miss his infection? Did I pick it up too late? Could I have picked it up earlier? Did I shave everything off of his brainstem, or did I shave too much and maybe it affected his brainstem a little bit? I began, using poor coping strategies to deal with the grief that I had from my feelings with Anthony. In fact, at one point, I actually stopped doing pediatric neurosurgery. I just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't have another Anthony. I just can't do it. And I ultimately left the town that I was in, Springfield. I moved back to New Jersey, and I started practicing in New Jersey, I think in some ways to escape the feeling of my feeling that I had hurt Anthony, that I had maimed him with my surgery. Because make no mistake, that boy was never going to be the same after that surgery. And I moved on. And fast forward 15 years, and practicing in New Jersey, and I start working on a book. I remember we're going to talk about writing a book. I'm working on a book about fear and trying to deal with the grief that I've had in neurosurgery and how to make it positive, how to figure out a way to outthink it. And I'm walking by this picture that's in my office. I'm saying to myself, you know what? You never even found out what happened to Anthony. So I get on the internet, and I get on Facebook, and I look up LaQuarrie's Pizza Parlor. And lo and behold, in Springfield, Massachusetts, it's still there. I get on the pictures, and I scroll down a little bit, and I see Mr. and Mrs. LaQuarrie, a little older, but they're there. And I scroll down a little farther, and I see a 24-year-old boy in a wheelchair with his parents. Oh my God, Anthony's still alive. I can't believe it. I thought he definitely would have passed away. So I call him up, and I say, Mr. and Mrs. LaQuarrie, I want to come up and see you. It's been a long time. I've been thinking about you. I'm writing this book about fear, and I've been thinking about Anthony, and I want to write Anthony's story. Can I come up and talk with you? And I want to see Anthony. I'm like, sure. So I drive up there that weekend, and I go to see them, and I say, Mr. and Mrs. LaQuarrie, I just wanted to tell you that, Anthony's had a profound effect on me. I met him, I was attached to him, I felt like I could cure him. And, when he had all those complications, I felt like I let you down. And they were looking at me, and, and they said, come on, I want you to see Anthony. So I came to see Anthony, and, Anthony's there, and he has some disabilities, no question, but he's still there, and he's part of his family. And they came around, they gave me this big hug, and they said, what are you talking about, Dr. McLaughlin? You are a hero. You saved our boy. He's with us. He's still my number one guy in the store. And they showered me with love and presents. They gave me a purse for Julie, my wife, that was from Italy, that they had just gotten back from a trip. And they gave me a shoot of their plant that they had in their store for 35 years so that I could take it home and plant it in my garden. And they gave me another picture, a picture that I had totally forgotten about. And this is a picture of the day we left Springfield, Massachusetts, and we had dinner at the LaQuarrie's Pizza Parlor with my wife, Julie, and my family, my kids, and Anthony. And I had totally forgotten about that picture. That was the picture that they were hanging in their restaurant. I was walking by my picture every day, feeling upset and feeling like I had let them down. They were looking at this picture, and they were happy, and it was a success. And I got back in my car that day, and I realized, oh my God, you've been telling yourself the wrong story for 15 years. Your job wasn't to cure Anthony. Your job was to serve him and to serve his family. And you did. You did it. And even when you didn't believe in yourself, this family believed in you. That was an amazing lesson for me. And it made me realize, wow, that's my purpose more than anything, is to serve. And I wouldn't trade treating Anthony or the 15 years of feeling bad about him for anything, for the feeling I have now, which is remarkable gratitude. Remarkable gratitude. So my lessons learned from these experiences are, one, if you want to be a better teammate, if you want to be a better coach, you want to be a better parent, you want to be a better person, don't waste a second of your life. Dig deep into literature and poetry and bring it back to your team. You can help your team with that inspiration. Number one. Number two, if your back's up against the wall and you're tired and you want to quit and you're thinking about quitting and you got a really bad situation in front of you, figure out a way to find something good. Find a way to make something really ugly your finest hour. And lastly, when you do everything right, when you've done it all, you laid it all out there, and something still goes terribly, terribly wrong, as it does in life, as it does in neurosurgery, and as it just happened in your career, understand that your greatest goal is to be of service and to look for your true purpose and continue to move towards it. Will you so these events, these transformative events in my life, will you let them paralyze you with fear and grief, or will you make them your finest hour? So I talked about transformative moments, and I'm hoping that this talk for you is a transformative moment. You have just been given a large amount of time, time that could be wasted or time that can be invested. I know that a lot of people have said read literature to you before. Your parents have probably said read books. I'm going to say something even more. I'm going to say write a book. You are faced with the most unique situation of any college athlete ever right now. How are you going to deal with it? Chronicle this. Start a diary. Help people through this. You could write your own book about this. It's a totally uncharted territory. And if you don't want to write a book, do something that little voice in your head said you couldn't do, whatever that is. You want to be a doctor? You can be a doctor. You're at one of the greatest colleges in the world right now. If you want to be CEO of a company, if you want to be an attorney, whatever it is, if you've been hearing that little voice in your head, but you haven't been paying attention to it, pay attention to it. You can do it. This can be your transformational moment. How about a Rhodes Scholar? Why don't you take this time and apply for a Rhodes Scholarship? You got an opportunity here. It's a golden opportunity. So I can't help you guys too much with writing a book. I'm happy to share my experience with you, but there's plenty of people on campus and at William & Mary that could help you do that. But I can definitely help you become a doctor if you want to become a doctor. And I'm going to give you guys my email. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, get some advice on becoming a doctor or being a neurosurgery surgeon, I'd be happy to share with you any insights I have. And as far as the Rhodes Scholar goes, I'm sorry, that's not something I was able to get to, but I know you can do it. I know somebody in your class can do it. So go for it. Please, if this has inspired you to do something, I want you to send me an email tonight. Dr. McLaughlin, Mark, I decided I'm going to do this tonight. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to become a Rhodes Scholar. I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to become a CEO. I'm going to become an attorney. Whatever it is, with these experiences, I hope that this talk was a transformative moment for you, because it was for me. It was an honor and pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Mark, that was unbelievable. I wonder if you could just talk about like how your wrestling played into, getting into your career, or even led you to some of the thinking before writing your book, or even some of these three kind of things that you talked about, like how wrestling at William & Mary or your experience at William & Mary played a part.
Absolutely. So first I would say it was the environment of excellence. So that being around so many smart people and dedicated student athletes. I mean, I remember going on road trips and we'd be in the van, I'd be talking philosophy with my coach. I mean, I just don't think that's happening around the country. I think that William & Mary attracts a unique student athlete. And so I was around many scholar athletes, which was inspiring to me, and they set the tone. And I got to tell you, if you looked at the last 100 phone calls I made, 15 of them, 20 of them are to William & Mary wrestlers. They're guys that were on my team because they're the closest friends. They're my blood brothers. And I'm sure you guys are going to feel the same way. Your blood sisters are going to be people you are with now, those relationships. And when you need inspiration, those are the people you're going to. So that's number one. Number two is being a Division I athlete. I mean, the training, the relentlessness of doing it. And really, if you are writing a book, more than anything, it's like sticking with it. It took like 5 years to write the book because I'd get setback after setback after setback. And, even when I had a good proposal and it was accepted by Scribner, they started trying to monkey with the plot of it. And I had to give them back their contract and their money because I said, I'm writing the book that I want to write. It's an adventure story about me and a big idea called cognitive dominance. It's not going to sell 1 million copies, but it's going to sell to people that want to learn something about being a better self, about not dominating others, but dominating your lesser self. So that would be this relentlessness of college athletics was just key. And then I just think the operating system that sports instill in your mind, even today, I say, when I get into trouble or when I'm trying to get into a flow state, I have rules, routines, and rituals. So rules are those things that, those are the things that coaches drill in your head. For wrestlers, it's keep your elbows in, keep your hips high in a scramble, those kinds of things. But in neurosurgery, it's the same thing. It's like always leave a drain, never cut what you can't see. Don't forget, let's never cut what you can't see is a good one because I brought another instrument. So concentration. So when I'm doing surgery, like when I'm biting bone spurs off the spine, I have to close this instrument around nerves. This instrument bites bone. It shaves bone around nerves. So it basically will roto-rooter an area around a nerve. And every single time I pull this trigger, I've got to be looking down at this mouth, and no piece of nerve tissue can be in the side of this thing. It's going to pull up the nerve, and it's going to change somebody's life forever. So I've got to be concentrating, and I'll probably pull that trigger 500, 600 times in an operation. And every single one of those times, you have to be focused on the mouth that's closing at hand, not the one before, not the one after. That takes you back to if you can meet with triumph and disaster and meet those two imposters just the same. Triumph and disaster, they're not in the present. They distract you. If you're thinking about the future, or like whether this person's going to do great after the surgery, or, oh my gosh, I'm operating on some celebrity, and if he doesn't do well, I'm going to, it's not going to be good for my reputation. That's not in the present. The present is take a bite of bone next to the nerve and don't get the nerve every single time. And I think that college athletics got me to focus and concentration. It really wet my whistle for that. And then neurosurgery kind of just took it to the next level. I don't know if I can hear you. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. Ladies, nobody put anything in the chat group. Does anyone want to ask a question? You just unmute yourself. Shelby, here we go. On the topic of sports with your surgeon mindset, do you think the devastation of having something not perfect was also an effect?
You're talking with respect to Anthony?
Yeah, like with sports, you know how sometimes you want to be perfect, you want to have kind of everything go your way. Do you think having that also in the back of your head, like that kind of goes along with what you do in the surgery room? Like you're always like, okay, this has to be perfect. And if it's not, like that's how you get like your fear of having something go wrong. That's kind of what I meant.
Well, I would say an obsession to perfection is critical in the process. But outcome is not always related to perfection. And that's really one of the lessons I learned. So if you expect a perfect outcome on every surgery, you're going to be a very unhappy surgeon, very unhappy doctor. You have to come to grips with you did the very best you could in that moment at that time, and let the chips fall where they may. So I think striving for perfection is still very important in practice. And then, basically the hay's in the barn when you get out in competition. You just got to let it flow.
Here's another one. I wasn't here for the beginning, but when did you know you wanted to be a brain surgeon, and how did you decide?
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. My grandfather was a doctor, and he was like my idol. I used to follow him around everywhere. I used to carry his black bag on his house calls and stuff. So I always wanted to be a doctor. But when you get to medical school, you get exposed to really all the areas of medicine. And I had a really amazing neuroanatomy professor, Dr. John Pavlishak, who's just a giant in the field. And he's a head trauma expert. And so he was such a teacher. It gave these beautiful descriptions of things. And I took to it. I really took to it. So you'll find what it's one of those Jim Collins Venn diagrams. You want to find like what you're good at, what your passion is, what can fulfill you. If you can do all those three, the intersection of those three are where you want to be. And I found that it was my passion, and the way I learned it from him really was, it was something that I was good at. But the beauty in medical school is you're going to rotate. If you go to medical school, you rotate through all the fields: OBGYN, psychiatry, medicine, surgery, and the subspecialty. So you'll know what really suits your personality.
Anybody else? Wow, it's a quiet group today. Here's one. What inspired you to major in philosophy, and how did that affect your medical school route? That's a good question.
I've always believed that if you follow inspirational teachers, they're going to guide you to where your spirit is. So I had a great philosophy professor, George Harris, in one of my introductory to philosophy classes, and I just thought, man, I just want to hang around this person. I just want to learn as much as I can from them. And so I just started taking more and more of them. And I got a lot of blowback, from my parents. Hey, you're going to pre-med? What about pre-med? And I was well advised to say, no, you're going to be more rounded if you do something else. And you're not going to get caught up in the grind of the pre-med program, which is very, very grueling. So I found it to help me be more rounded, be able to relate to people more. It's helped me be more inquisitive and kind of look at more the meaning of what things are. And it's been a passion of my life. I love reading books about philosophy. One I would recommend, if you haven't read, is called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It's a wonderful book about finding your personal legend. And so I think that if you're going to do your best in your best classes with professors that you love, that's who you need to find, and let your major find you.
Did you have a certain process in how you wrote your book?
Well, multiple processes. I started with giving talks like this, stories of neurosurgery, up at West Point. I got invited to go to the Center for Enhanced Performance, and they just said, just tell us what goes through your mind. And I have no military background at all. My son Patrick's in the Marines, but I had nothing. But so I didn't want to try and put myself in the shoes of a cadet. I couldn't even imagine what that's being like. But I said, I'll tell you what goes through my mind in a neurosurgery operation, and I'll go through it with you. So I started telling stories and experiences. And as I got through them, I was first of all, it was helping me be a better surgeon. It was helping me to kind of come up with some of the universal rules that I follow and helping me understand myself better. And then one of the times I was up there, somebody said, well, it sounds like this is like cognitive dominance. And I was like, what's cognitive dominance? I never heard of that before. And they said, well, it's enhanced situational awareness that facilitates rapid and accurate decision-making under stressful conditions with limited decision-making time. So I was like, wow, that's not only military, that's neurosurgery. That's what I do. But it's also everything you do in life. I mean, it's parenting, it's running a business, it's trying to make a life decision. We're always doing this under stress with limited information, under stressful conditions. So I thought, wow, that's a great concept. And I think the stories and the rules of neurosurgery that I've learned could apply to it. And I think it applies. I was fortunate to start my own business, Princeton Brain and Spine, in 2005. And so I learned a lot from the business side of things too. And just, it all came together. It all came together in something called consilience. I don't know if another word that is I really love is consilience, and that's the unity of knowledge. And that's a philosophical concept, and it basically means, like, if you look broadly enough at things, you're going to see a common thread in everything, in science, in the humanities, in sports, in everything. There's a common thread if you look for it. And so that really helped me. And then I was very fortunate to come across a co-writer, Sean Coyne, who was just a remarkable help. And another lesson I learned, like, you can never be great on your own. You can only be great through partnerships. And Sean helped stitch together my West Point stories and helped me see things that I didn't see. And so I had a wonderful co-writer and editor who helped me along the way. Could have never done it without him. So partnership is truly important.
Okay, well, Mark, we are going to take you up on your offer of your email address. Can I pass it on to the team?
Absolutely. BrainSpineMD.
BrainSpineMD
@gmail.com.
That's awesome. I've gotten a lot of private messages while you were talking about how amazing it was, and I'm blown away, and feel very fortunate that you and I have kind of had these paths together all these years. Now we just need to get you to Williamsburg somehow.
That's the next step, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it can be full circle. But what an amazing story you have, and like I said to you guys at the beginning, with zero margin for error in a field like that, and the fact that you were a student athlete at William & Mary just makes it so cool, and just gives all of our players a real connection. And so we thank you for your time, because we know how valuable it is, and hopefully you haven't missed too many voice messages while you were on with us, but we do know how precious your time is. And so we want to thank you. And I will kind of put together a summary of what Mark talked about. We'll have a copy of this as well. And then I do encourage you guys, why not reach out, be bold. If you have something going through your head tonight, send it to them. And it would be great to start a relationship with you, Mark. And so thank you. And I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything. So inspirational. I love this. I can't believe how great he is. So it sounds like everybody really enjoyed it.
It's my honor to serve you.
Awesome. All right. Well,
I want to hear from you guys. Okay. Good luck. And I know this is bad, but something good can come of it. Something good is going to come of it. Make it happen.
Make it happen. All right. Go Tribe. And thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Amazing.
We need to send his info to